Welcome to the Paisans podcast. We're your hosts, the brothers from other mothers, Dante, Dave, and Sark. Join us as we talk about current events, our wives, kids, or whatever else life is throwing at us this week. With the Paisans, you're with family. All right. Well, welcome back, Dave. It's good to have you back. And as we were saying before we started recording, it's been something like 2 months since we've sat down. We all didn't realize we were parting. But of course, we have to first and foremost acknowledge Dave is now entering the dad gang. As per his
got
hat.
my hat. Already got my initiation into the gang. And yeah, thank you, baby girl. Looking forward to it. I'm happy to have firstborn daughter here. It'll be a good thing. Keep the trend going with the family.
And then you went away to the Far East. You went out to the Philippines. You were in Japan for a while. I mean, were you away for 2 solid weeks?
Almost 3. This is the longest vacation I've ever taken.
You were gone for a while.
I've very rarely until I met my wife taken long vacations like this, taking this much time off of work, which is always gives me a little anxiety. But yeah, no, it was awesome. I'm really happy that I did it because it was worth it. I did actually get, one thing I forgot to tell you guys before is I did actually get food poisoning when I was out there in the Philippines because I drank the water, or I don't know. We think the ice might have been not good from this one place we went to, and I was the only one who got sick though. That was something I could probably tell you guys more off air about because I had one day that was not very good. I came back and it was like the coldest it had ever been. It was just, it's been so cold there, but
yes. Yeah, you've been back for like 2 weeks, right?
More than that, like almost a month actually. Okay. We got back on the 17th, I think.
Okay.
So dude, I'm really behind on your posts. Oh man. Cause like I don't know, like with Instagram, I don't really look at when the post, I just assume if I'm seeing it, it was from today or like yesterday. So I feel like you just got back. I can't believe you got back a month ago.
Well, we were supposed to record a couple times too, and we had to reschedule because life happens. And so, yeah, it feels like it's been all this time. And then it's been a couple of months. And in the middle of it, David's gone for like three plus weeks. Well, it's good to have you back. And it's good to have you joining the Fatherhood Club.
Amen.
It's one of those things that nobody can explain to you, but once you have one, nobody needs to explain anything to you. You completely will understand it. And I look forward to that for you. It's an amazing experience. And we're talking about having a daughter. I'm going to try and pivot that into the conversation we were going to have today with this woman, Allison Armstrong. I've been obsessing with. She's completely filled up my feeds, both in YouTube and also in Instagram. And so I saved a couple of clips of her.
Yeah.
So she is one of these women who she has studied psychologically. She has studied men for 30 plus years. She's also studied women, and she's one of these women who like explains men to women, and then she explains women to men. That's mostly what you see clips of her doing. And she's got a lot of really good anecdotes and sort of ways of breaking down the different ways that men see and hear and see the world around them. And she explains it to women to women in ways that they can understand, and vice versa. She explains women to men. She does a lot of that, And so she's just one of my favorites who I see all the time because I think she's sharp. I think she knows what she's talking about. And so she's one of the many. Actually, I think I'm going to start with one of my favorites, which is titled "Women Don't Want to See the Truth." Let me see if I can share my screen here.
How women teach honest men it's not worth it. Because what will happen is a man will tell the truth, and he'll tell a truth that's been true for him, maybe for as long as he can remember. Or it might be a newer truth. It's only been the last couple of years or the last few months. But it's the truth. And he tells it to her. And she's upset about that. You shouldn't think that. You shouldn't feel that way. No, that's wrong. And because of how women are wired, where to be upset is to be displeased. Ooh. Don't have anybody be upset. So women believe that if you know how upset I am about what you just told me is true for you, you will change your truth. That you will, just like I would. will change your truth. No, men are smarter than that. There was no problem with that truth until it came out of their mouth. Until they told her. It was fine as long as it wasn't said. So this is how men are literally taught, trained, as he said, to not tell the truth.
Wow.
I just can't even tell you how much that resonated with me at one time in my relationship.
Well, especially that last comment she just said that. So that's why men are wired to not tell the truth.
What
I
she's
agree.
saying basically is that is that men do a calculation, and what they determine is that my life was perfectly fine for all this time. What I just told you has been true all this time. You don't like that, and all of a sudden now I'm having problems. The only thing that changed was I told you, and it's very logical. It's kind of very straightforward in how it is. Whereas it's just different for women. They're relating and they focus on the relationship. They prioritize the relationship and harmony in the relationship. And so there's this truth is less of a priority than harmony. And so there's a lot of unspoken things that go on in female dynamics, where women try to connect with men, communicate to men as if they're women. And we do the same thing. Men do the same thing too. We tend to communicate to women thinking that they're men, but it doesn't work. Like, this is just one of her many clips. So let's see it.
You can tell a woman's state of mind by how she moves. If she's going in straight lines, her body's all just moving forward, she's in a committed state of mind. How you ask her for sex is when would be a good time to have sex. 8 o'clock, be there or be square. Now this gets into men don't want sex scheduled because they worry about performing. And so
No, that's something different. Where do I,
But those are all like, wow, those are all pretty powerful statements.
She is so insightful. She is so insightful. I saw her recently on Chris Williamson podcast, and that I think is maybe where this clip is from.
Mm-hmm.
And I had seen her before, but I knew Chris Williamson. I was like, oh, this will be good. So I listened to the whole thing because I had only ever seen clips of her and reels of her and things like this. So once I watched the whole thing, I was like, okay, she is really sharp. She really knows what she's talking about. And he asked her questions all over the board, like everything from sex questions to just mostly questions about communication, values, how men value, like what men value versus what women value and things like that. This clip, she's talking about how for men, if they get shown appreciation, tends to last. She tends to describe men as like a bowl, and where you pour something in and it evaporates, but it takes a long time. And women is like a colander where you pour something in and it kind of more or less goes right through, and then you need to keep pouring in because they need to hear. So she's like, for example, you tell a man like you're really grateful that he did this or that and that you appreciate him and love him, and like that can last for days for him, weeks, months for some men.
Oh yeah.
Whereas for a woman, you tell her that she's beautiful and that you love her. An hour later, she's not going to be tired of hearing it. She still wants to keep hearing it. It's like, and an hour later, she might ask you, "Do you still think I'm pretty? Like, do you still love me?" And the guy's like, "What, are you kidding me? I told you 10 minutes ago." And she's like, "Yeah, I know, but I still want to hear."
Tell me the truth.
Yeah. What haven't I clipped on?
That one with the lady that looks like Christina Pajitsky.
Okay, so you want to hear what Christina had to say? I found this really fascinating. This is related, although this is a different angle.
What makes women happy? And I was thinking on the toilet, well, what makes me happy is, unfortunately, or fortunately, the traditional things. And now, had I said that to my 20-year-old self, I would be horrified because I was a good feminist and I fought my way through comedy and I did all the clubs. I'll show you, I'll be the best female comic. And I carried this anger that compelled me for 20 years, right?
Notice, by the way, she says right out of the gate, I would have hated to hear this 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Or 20-year-olds.
And then I became a mom and I got humbled by illness. And then I was like, okay, so what makes me happy? I know what makes me happy. I can't speak for all women, but is there something to my biology, to my essence? Possibly. Do we know what makes all men happy?
I love that she referred to her essence. Like, seriously, I love that she referred to her essence. I think sight of things like that, we undervalue that because it's not measurable.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
I think too, it's like It was the male ideal of success that ruined women. It was this idea that in order to become equal, we had to be like you.
Boom.
Yes.
That's the problem. I have to have my career exactly like Todd's. I have to be successful. Like, this is not going to work for me.
She just said it. You know, it's like the ideal became you have to be like a man. And in so many cases, like the worst version of a man. It's like career obsessed,
Yeah.
you know, sexually promiscuous, you know, not dedicated to one person, like not family is like an afterthought. Like, I'm sorry, like guys who are like that, who behave when you're in your 20s, they're like overgrown children. You know, that's not a good man to be. Even if you're another man, you shouldn't be trying to imitate that.
Although some women seem attracted to men like that, but I don't think men, for the most part, are attracted to women like that.
No,
I
don't-
completely agree.
Yeah.
What she's saying, and I agree with her, is that women were told that is what you should be idealizing. You know, it's the Sex in the City. It's the single lifestyle where sex is like shaking hands with a person. You do it to see whether you like them or not. Do they fit on well or not? And there's no acknowledgement that like takes a small piece of your soul, for heaven's sake.
Right. Right.
Again, not even like trying to be prudish around something like that. Simply to say what she's acknowledging is basically everything I was told I should be valuing is not what I value today. And I don't know that I ever should have been valuing it. I think what I'm valuing today is what I should have been valuing the whole time.
She's saying like that you're raised, like that's kind of what you're raised in a way to think, like you need to be that way. But where's that coming from? Like what's
Yes.
driving that?
So what I've heard, and don't quote me on like second wave versus third wave feminism. Like I think it gets a little cloudy in terms of all that stuff, but based on everything I've seen and understood, and this gets, you know, it's deep, right? So forgive me, but the idea is what I've heard is this: with the advent of the birth control pill, sex became a much less risky thing for women, right? And at the same time, you had a major push for, you know, not only women had rights at that point, but it was the whole women's liberation movement, which was, hey, look, we can be just like men too. You know, we can just want to sleep with people. That was a lot of it. And then also it was, I don't want to rely on a man. I want to be able to earn my own money. I should be able to go to work and have a career, and I shouldn't be forced to stay home and raise children if that's not what I want to do. And that was like sort of how it came out. And I think most people said, well, okay, that makes sense. You shouldn't be forced to do anything you don't want to do. But for reasons we could talk about, I think at length, I think what happens is that these movements gain a momentum where they're not being driven by the center of the movement. They're being driven by the extremes of the movement. And the movement then becomes, first of all, when you have something like this, which attains a certain level of virtue, social virtue, then you start to get very quickly, you get predators who see it as cover. Okay. The same way that a pedophile looks at something like, well, let's use some cliche examples, the Boy Scouts or the church, as a good way to run cover because, gee, I can get access to, you know, my prey, and I'm looked at as, he would never, right? The same way you get people who adopt the ideology for any number of reasons. One, because they're sociopathic and they want to exploit it. Others, because they may be deeply just so, you know, so messed up psychologically that they just see an opportunity to, what's the word I'm looking for? To reinforce negative opinions that they have. So again, we mean the extremes of the movement. So who do you get? Well, do you start to get women who've maybe been burned by men and hate men? And then what are they going to do? Well, they're not going to say, well, listen, you know, it's not all men. No, they're going to talk in extreme language. So it's going to be all men this and all men that. And then all of a sudden you start to get a movement that feels more like man hating than it is about women's liberation.
I was going to say, it's like the man only because we're talking about this topic, but it's like the man is automatically the bad guy because it's the other half of the couple. So it's like if I'm home and I'm doing all these traditional things and he's sort of the reason that I'm held back, I'm subservient to him. It's not necessarily seen as like fulfilling a primal instinct or drive as much as, well, he's the reason that I'm doing that or that I feel that way.
Right.
And I don't want to serve him anymore. It sounds like she's saying, hey, look, I just realized after a while, like it was my own self that desired those things. It wasn't serving a man or feeling like I had to fall into the system, but
that's right.
Gravitated for those things naturally.
That's what she says. And she's using all of the right caveat language. She's saying it's just what works for me. I can't speak for everyone, which we all feel obliged to do anymore, because if we speak in generalities, there's always somebody who's going to go, I know a person who doesn't fit there. It's like, we all get to deal with that, and we all get judged because somebody, God forbid, you just speak in a generalization. But generally speaking, what she's saying is that that's probably a choice that a lot of women would make if they felt that it was as socially acceptable. It's interesting how things have flipped. It's less socially acceptable anymore to say that that's what your priority is. So anyway, it's interesting to hear her say things like this. And I save clips like this because I like to share this with the girls. Like, I should take a moment and talk about this because there's a reason that this is like a very near and dear to my heart. My mother was wanted to be a homemaker. She wanted to get married and have a lot of babies. That was like her life's goal, her life's ambition. And that just wasn't to be her life because, like, my parents separated when I was like 1 and divorced when I was 2. And, look, it just wasn't what her life was to be. But what she did was, as that relationship ended, she was very angry. Very angry. And so she and she was very hurt too. And so she turned herself off to men who were good choices, and she told everyone who would listen, and even those who didn't want to listen, about how she was a proud working mother and how she was a proud feminist and how she didn't need no man and how, she was going to afford L'Oreal on her own and all these other things. And I got to be witness firsthand to what was really going on in the house versus what she was projecting to the whole rest of the world. And what I could see very clearly was she was miserable. She was lonely and she wanted a man, and she still had that drive in her to like be a mom with a bunch of kids. And I mean, it was pretty clear early on that was not going to be the case, but she still had it in her to be that. And yet she lived in this total denial for decades, And so this hits home for me because on the one hand, of course, I understand like people have career ambitions, and, it's like the fact that you have to be so careful when you have this conversation just says a lot, that you can't have this discussion and without feeling like you need to say every 30 seconds, of course, I don't mean everyone.
Yeah.
Right. But generally speaking, I just think that we are doing this disservice to young women in particular right now, where we are devaluing what is truly feminine, true femininity, bringing beauty to this world, bringing life into this world. I mean, like, I'll try and make a connection here because, Dave, maybe I see this too as an extension of your wife's femininity. She posts on Instagram a lot of like food that she's cooking. And the food, not only does it look delicious, but what you can tell is it's beautifully done, right? So there's pride in what she's cooking, that she's cooking for her family, whatever family she has. And she's taking pride in making it look good, not only taste good, but to look good, like all of that. It's part of the beautification that women naturally have. They bring beauty to the world on like every level. And that energy misdirected can be really, really insidious.
Mm-hmm.
Really insidious. And I'm afraid that what we are seeing is we have that the movement years ago was overtaken. The controls were taken by angry people. I'll say people because I think it was, we could say women, but angry feminists. And their goal became less about equality and more about vengeance, justice on some level, and the misdirected energy comes in. What's my point? My point is living in delusion. My point is living and projecting an illusion that serves some external optical purpose, so other people think one thing of you, and then I suppose serves some inner psychological purpose. But none of it is good. None of it is truthful.
Yeah, and the counter to objectifying women doesn't necessarily have to be women acting as men. And it's interesting because you mentioned like Dave and your wife, Dave, like kudos to social media. I mean, I never give social media kudos, but now suddenly some of those things like being a homemaker, preparing food for your family can be glamorous, and thank God for that, because previously that was not glamorous at all. It was just either you're working or you're a supermodel or you're an actress.
Now you can do those things and that could be your job. When you talk about social media,
Yeah.
that can actually
Cook
be
for
where
my
you
family.
make money.
And I fucking love it. Yeah.
Well, a lot of these influencers are doing just that. Like my daughters follow several of these influencers who are like trad wives, and they're doing this whole thing. Now they're filming almost everything they do, but they're filming themselves. Like some of them, Mike, are dressing up in like 1950s, like like 1950s housewife garbs with the beehive hairdos, whatever, while they clean the whole house and they film it, or they make homemade cereal and then make it for their children. But look, you don't even have to go to the extreme. It's just, again, if you hear what she's saying, basically what she's saying is, and she says this, I think, in a second. And by the way, I think if anybody doesn't know this, her husband is Tom
Segura.
What's his last name? What's
Segura.
that? Segura.
Tom Segura.
Thank you, Tom Segura.
Yeah.
And so when she's talking about Tom can go do all that, that's what she's referring to. And by the way, he is a very successful comedian. He's got to make a ton more money than her on the comedy circuit.
They have a show together, don't they?
On the comedy circuit, he
basement?
definitely does make more than that. But yeah, I was just going to say they have a podcast together where they
Right.
co-host, and they're probably making more money off of that, honestly, now.
Maybe.
Because it's a pretty big one.
Yeah. But what she's saying, though, is in terms of going out and having to go out every day and go do the travel and be like in the years before they had this podcast, when it was just like, she's basically saying, I did it, but I have no interest in doing it anymore. And in retrospect, like, whatever, I don't want to put words in her mouth. I just thought it was really fascinating to hear her saying this and being so, and kudos to her for being so honest.
So this clip of her is kind of tripping me out, because on that podcast, she's like the complete opposite of this. It's like, fart jokes, ridiculous videos. And she's very funny on that show, honestly. That was the one thing that made me like think this is actually her, is when she was like, I was sitting on the toilet one day. It's like, that's just the kind of humor she has.
Yes.
But this is a very insightful, well thought out, serious, monologue she's on here.
I mean, I'll be the first to say, like I only found my humility in the last 2 years, like really found my humility and have been able to say, wow, okay. If I open myself up to not having a lot of answers to a lot of things and realizing first and foremost that I'm not the most important thing in the world, which is a very hard thing for an only child or somebody who was an only child for 14 years, Dave, beg pardon, to swallow, it's that you're not the most important thing in the world. And then, having kids for me was that thing.
I think you said it. It's, so many people that's got to be catalyst. I mean,
And to bring it full circle now, what are we telling people today? Hold off on having kids. Why having kids? Don't have kids till you're financially secure. Don't have kids till you have all this in place. Don't have kids till you have your own place. Don't have kids till you this. All these other things are the most important. Then you can have kids on the back end, right? Well, let's watch this clip, because this is directly related to that very point. I mean, maybe you've seen this clip as well, but I thought this was really interesting.
Daycare was the feminist agenda. It was about the second wave of feminism. They said, put your babies in daycare. It's the only way you're going to go back to work, and work. And they didn't talk about children. The first wave of feminists, they talked about children. Mary Shelley and Mary Wollstonecraft, they believed that mothering was powerful work. It was work. It was a career. It was admired. It was elevated. They also believed in fighting the patriarchy. They believed in equality, but they didn't forget about mothering. The second wave of feminists, I think it was Betty Friedan, said that staying at home with your children was, she called it a concentration camp with comforts. That was the beginning of the tide. That's when the tide turned for women, where the narrative changed. So
that narrative is, there's a lot of truth to that narrative. I see it.
And it goes back to what you said. It's like, it feels like that statement about the second wave of feminism and the leader, it feels like the bitterness you were talking about. It feels like a bitter person who has a platform.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And let me tell you, I saw from my mother bitterness and vitriol, at men in general. But it was always, of course, it's like, well, this one man did this thing to me, and now you see how these others kind of do the thing. Which, by the way, one thing I've learned in my life is that we attract energy and certain types of people until we have learned not to do it, until we've learned whatever they're here to teach us to do, which helps us then not attract people like that if they're not good for us. So the idea that this person did me wrong and now I have to dwell on it for the rest of my life is very very much in the victim space. And it doesn't hold oneself accountable for attracting the type of person who would do that to you, which is very cold and might feel like victim blaming, but it's more like, it's not as if the other person has no accountability, but
right.
We can't live in a space where we don't look at ourselves and say, okay, what am I doing to draw in that type of energy or that type of person? Okay. I'll give you an example of what I mean. So one of the things I have struggled with over the course of my life is not setting strong boundaries and feeling like other people's problems are my problems. Like when someone comes to me and they have a problem, like adopting that as my problem. Okay, now I need to fix this. Okay. Now, people who are overwhelmed by their own problems, and by the way, I got this because I grew up in a house where basically my mother was like, oh my God, this problem, Dante, and as soon as I was old enough to do anything about it, I felt like, my gosh, what can I do to reduce the chaotic energy in this house? Well, let me try and solve these problems, right? So now what am I doing? Every time I meet a person who has this chaotic energy, who's, I'm like, oh, let me solve your problems. Okay. So what do you think that does? Well, it attracts people with that energy, right? So I might be like, why is it every time I turn around, there's somebody with that energy and they're bothering me? It's like, well, because I'm out here ringing a bell going, hey, if you're needy and you're psychologically off the rails, come, I'm going to take it up as my problem to fix you. So, again, I hopefully that's humble in that to say, like, it's not as if I'm not speaking this as if I'm above the fray. I am saying it because I just believe it's true. This woman, by the way, this is the clip we were just looking at. So that clip we were seeing, she is talking to her, and this woman too, it's all the same woman, was on that show Trigonometry.
Well, I've seen this woman.
Well, I don't know if you know, like, Konstantin Kissing. He's the guy he's one of the two guys who do Trigonometry. He might be a genius. Like, he's very smart, like a lot of comedians. He's very smart. And I think having being a comedian, I think you just have a perspective on the world that allows you to see what a lot of people just are too deep in for themselves to see. And he just very calmly got her to reveal herself as basically a complete fraud. I mean, they had an exchange where she basically accused him of being a white supremacist. And it was just like so funny because he was just very calmly responding to her and answering her questions. So it was intriguing to me that when the only other time I see her, she's arguing with this woman, and she's also saying some of the most heinous things I've ever heard somebody say.
I was going to say, you sent me something with this woman. She's the one who's always essentially saying the opposite of what this other person was just saying.
Yes.
She's the villain in this whole thing.
Exactly. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for summing it up concisely. That's exactly what it is. She's the villain. Well, this might be here. Let's real quick. Like maybe this is the clip.
Having a child is becoming an unpaid Uber driver for someone who doesn't want to go to karate and hates you anyway. And it's hard work.
That is a narrative that I'm going to push back on, which is part of the problem, which is that it's the narrative of misery, which has been promoted. And it's not miserable to have children. It's joyful. It's the most incredible love you'll ever experience in your life, but it's also really hard. And I think we have a bunch of pussies, actually. We are producing women and men who are pussies. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. They cannot deal with discomfort. They cannot deal with frustration. They cannot deal with sacrifice or hardship or responsibility. They want it to be easy. Who said raising children was easy? You don't get the good stuff unless you put in the work. And it's the same if you're out in the world. Of course, it's easier to go to a job than it is to stay home with a child, because a child demands more of you, but it also gives back more.
I've seen this clip before, actually.
Right?
I feel like I just saw that clip recently.
It's all over. It's
Yeah.
one of those clips that has really made the rounds. And it brings tears to my eyes every time I hear it, because one, just to hear it described, to hear children described so negatively, it just really strikes a nerve with me on so many levels.
So does that lady have kids though?
She's going to ask.
Does she have
What do you
kids?
think?
I'm guessing
do you
no,
think?
right? Yeah, like I'm guessing that answer has to be no.
Right. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is to say, I think what we have at this point is we're about 3 generations in, 2.5 generations in now, since we started this little experiment of saying that, women should behave like the worst version of men. And the result is, an inordinate number of kids being raised by single mothers, an inordinate number of women who, in my opinion, are living in self-delusion, both out of necessity, out of like psychological necessity, but then also because they've convinced themselves that this is what they really want. They're giving themselves to men left and right, when in fact, I think most of them would really rather be in a monogamous relationship. And the men that they raise, and I'm telling you this as a young man, a guy who was raised by a woman, are fucked up. Okay. We have problems with women. These young men, they're craving healthy male role models. And if they're not getting it, then they have a lot of emotions that get misdirected, and they get resentful, they feel unworthy, and then they're not men that are appealing or good men for young women.
These clips are so valuable. I mean, they're not even long. Some of these you play were 10 seconds. And just to hear somebody say that and validate that, and even for a woman, a young woman, even guys who like it's somewhere that's in your mind, but you're afraid to think it or say it. And now you see people say, that's totally fine. You're going to have those thoughts, and that's normal.
It's building momentum too. I mean, I know that
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot more of this where it's like, as these clips get out there, they get shared, they resonate with people.
Yeah.
Because I think that the truth really does resonate with people. And I know that, like, and again, I'm not contradicting anything I've said. It's just, I know that for like my daughters, they've had plenty of conversations. And I even said this, they've had conversations with young women who are like, oh my gosh, not at all. And then later on, they'll come back to them and go, I got to say, what you were talking about, that really does kind of sound nice. And then they start looking at some of the same clips, or they start going down some of the same paths and starting to understand. So it's not like a hopeless situation, but having these conversations, I think, is like the start. And for me, having grown up in that environment, it's like, this is where I have the opportunity to shed light on what I got to see from on the inside, as I like to say.
100%.